Hello and thank you for joining us on Newsweek, where we highlight some of the biggest stories that made the headlines recently. I am Mark Otabo. This week, President Tinubu presents 2024 budget proposal of 27 trillion naira. And also this week, Ondo Assembly backs President Tinubu's peace deal, withdraws appeal against Deputy Governor Ayedatiwa. And later on the show, Supreme Court says old new naira notes remain legal tender indefinitely. All the details in a moment. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. This week, President Bola Tinubu unveiled a 27.5 trillion naira budget estimate for the 2024 fiscal year. The budget was presented to a joint session of the National Assembly, where it is currently undergoing scrutiny and deliberation for final approval. In his presentation, he declared the 2024 appropriation is themed the budget of renewed hope. The proposed budget seeks to achieve job-rich economic growth, macroeconomic stability, a better investment environment, enhance human capital development, as well as poverty reduction and greater access to social security. Now, joining me to discuss this is Marvin Yobana, a political affairs analyst and Africa representative, World Assembly for Youth. Mr. Yobana, good to have you on the show this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic.
Good evening.
All right, moving straight to the discussion. Now, the proposed budget of 27 trillion naira presented by President Bola Tinubu, from your calculations, how do you think this budget will play out, considering some of the issues of economic concerns that we are still battling with?
Well, first of all, let me commend the president for following up with the merely presentation of the budget that did not have to lapse into the next year. We know that the budget presented so far, it's a budget that, based on what we've seen, the timelines and the areas highlighted in the budget, is a budget that will definitely renew the hopes of Nigerians. This 27.5 trillion in both the recurrent expenditure and the budget definitely takes care of the physical responsibilities of the administration. It also will look at the long-term economic stability of the economy. And these are things that we as Nigerians are looking up to. You know, remember that this government hit the ground running, and they came up with policies, very hard policies, that will stimulate the economy, because what they met on ground was a very bad economy. And because of that, he needed this kind of budget to be able to stimulate growth in the economy. And that is why I see this budget as a budget that definitely will restore hope in the economic sector, because for now that the government is busy looking for people that will come into Nigeria and invest, you have to give them a robust budget that they will see that, yes, the government is really serious about ensuring that those key areas that needed key development efforts from the government are being addressed. And I hope that the National Assembly will do the needful in coming up to ensure that this budget is passed on time, and that all the timelines, all the MDAs and all the departments of government should definitely ensure that there are no bottlenecks in ensuring that this budget is being implemented. And that is the job of the National Assembly. So I see a glimpse of hope at the end of the day.
All right. Now, looking at this budget, now, what is a vital priority that should be followed through that would also directly impact positively on other areas?
Yeah, if you look for the areas of priorities are, if you look at the areas of, let's say, if you look at, for instance, let's talk about the Niger Delta areas, for instance. You see, the Niger Delta is a special area that helps in ensuring that the government has a sustainable economic inflow. So if you look at the development areas of the Niger Delta, for instance, the road infrastructure, the security, and the attack on pipelines and the theft of oil going on in that region, the NDDC, as they presented their budget, they ensured that those key communities that are host communities that are actually responsible for major oil production in Nigeria, that those amenities that they have been agitating for are put right into the budget. And once that is done, you will see that it will increase the level of security in the area. It will increase the area of those who are doing surveillance to ensure that these issues of pipeline vandalism and oil theft is reduced. And the communities will own these projects as their projects, and they will see the government as their own government. So the key areas I think that government should highlight are, one, areas of infrastructure, which is key, critical areas of infrastructure, most especially that those areas that have to do with production, the areas where we have agricultural products from, how farmers can be able to access their farms and ensure that the security for those areas are provided, and the security departments are given what they need to ensure that they create the enabling environment for farmers to be able to operate so that we have food security in Nigeria. Because these are the two critical areas that would directly impact on our economy. Because if there's shortfall in oil production, it will affect us. If there's shortfall of production in food, it will affect us. So these two critical areas are areas we must look at. One, security, the other one, infrastructure. It's very key that we look at these two areas.
All right, quickly, you just mentioned security now, which is a very, very topical concern with what has been happening around the country. Now, how do you really think this can be effected to ensure a stable security atmosphere? Because at the end of the day, if the security is not, feasible enough, it might be very difficult to carry out every other preambles that connects to this budget. So from your calculations or from your perception, how do you think the government should ensure that this security of a thing is behind us so we can move forward? Hello, Mr. Yobana. Okay, it appears we have... All right, Mr. Yobana, can you hear me now?
Clearly. Are you hearing me?
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Fantastic.
I didn't get the last part of your...
Yes.
Get the last part of your question.
Yeah, you mentioned security. You mentioned security, actually, and that's exactly where I'm going with this conversation, yeah? Quite a number of us, quite a number of Nigerians are very concerned about that critical part of the budget. Now, from your perception, how do you think this should be followed through with so that we can at least have some level of sanity in trying to implement every other areas that concerns this budget? Because at the end of the day, if the security is not well grounded, if the security is not well established, we might be finding it very difficult. So if you would prefer solutions to the government, how do you think this security arm of this budget should be followed through effectively?
Well, I think that we have somebody that is has zero tolerance for corruption, the person of the National Security Advisor,
right,
who has actually been in the head of anti-corruption before. So those issues we used to have in the past, where monies are allocated for security issues and find themselves in the pocket of politicians, I think that should be a thing of the past. If the funds that are released to the various security departments and agencies are used judiciously, then we will not be having the issues of security. For instance, mobility for the Nigerian police, for the civil defense, for the Nigerian Army, Navy, and so forth. It's very key because the response time between where a crime is committed or where an information is gotten is very crucial. So if they don't have the required mobility in terms of transportation, in terms of personnel, and they don't have the right equipment to fight this thing, it will become a problem for us. And I think that more funds should be deployed into technology in terms of the security arrangements. Because if you look at what happened during the Buhari administration, where a one-time minister for transport talked about that they needed some digital equipment to monitor the railway, and he was crying about it, and it did not happen until bandits had to kidnap people from the train. So these are key areas in terms of digital security. We have to look at that critically and make sure that funds are expended clearly and carefully on that. In terms of getting manpower, and also the welfare of the security personnel. It is very crucial so that will act as a stimulant or as an incentive for them to do this job, so that they are not being persuaded or coined by some persons because of lack of welfare and all that.
All right, Mr.
The National Security Advisor will collaborate with other heads of the various security agencies to make sure that these monies are spent judiciously, expeditiously, and ensure that there must be a thorough check by the National Assembly. They must do their oversight function, which is very important.
All right, finally, before I let you go, actually, you know, human capital is a very, very significant importance in the economy. Now, the issue of brain drain, which has been holding us back as a country, how do you think this budget should capture that area to ensure that at least we have the human capital to stay back home and develop our countries? Other countries asking for our citizens to come over is because they want to develop their country, but here we are. We are losing people every day in the health sector, in the educational sector. People are leaving the country in droves. So how do you think this can actually play out to ensure that we have a stable workforce, to ensure we have growth?
Yeah, it is very, very important that the government must look into that angle, because even if when you have a good workforce and they are not trained or they are not equipped with the necessary information and tools they need and skills they need, it becomes a wasted effort. And in terms of that, you find out that the civil service itself needs a training and retraining of their workers and all that. At the civil service level, at the at all these levels, they need crucial and very, very important. Niger Delta, for instance, most of the persons, most of the people working there are people who have been in that department for a long while, you know, and they needed to be trained and retrained and all that. Now, if you look at the student loans and the little scholarship that are given from this department, you find that most times they say they don't have enough funds to pay these students or to pay for the scholarship that are being given to indigent students. So these are areas that they must dedicate funds to ensure that we now ensure that we have the right persons to do the job. Okay. Because if we keep encouraging people to run out of this country, then we are just training people for the rest of the world.
All right, Mr.
There must be a...
all right, Mr. Yobana,
there must be...
We're running against time quickly, but before I let you go, in a few seconds, what development do you hope to see in the Niger Delta region in the next 1 year? Because you actually captured that in your discussion earlier.
Yeah, in the Niger Delta region, we have a lot of issues. If you look at the road leading up to One and the seaport and the refinery, it has been in a very precarious situation for so long, for the past 7 years. So it is time that the federal government must look at those key areas where they are generating funds to ensure that it's fixed. You cannot leave the road that goes to a refinery and to a seaport desolate like that. Even where we are having issues of war, they have not seen those type of roads. So these are the critical areas we want funding for the Niger Delta Development Commission, we want funding for the Niger Delta Ministry. And we also want to encourage the oil companies to pay in their own quota to ensure that this infrastructure development can continue in the region. This will douse the tension and also create the enabling environment for the businesses to strive. And this is what the economy needs now, because the country is bleeding and we need a lot of funds. So for us to have more funds, we must create the enabling environment, ensuring that all those infrastructures are working. And that is very important so that investors will be able to find it comfortable for them to do business and live here.
All right, Mr. Yobana, thank you very kindly for your time. We really appreciate your presence on the show this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you for staying with us. A bit of peace seemed to return to Ondo State this week as the Ondo State House of Assembly declared its support for the peace deal agreed with President Bola Tinubu by political stakeholders over the political crisis in the state, but insisted Lucky Aiyedatiwa remained deputy and not acting governor. President Tinubu had last week intervened to stop the political impasse in the state, which had trailed the ill health of Governor Rotimi Akeredolu, his absence from the state, and the impeachment process against Aiyedatiwa. Also, the State Assembly withdrew their appeal challenging the decision of the Federal High Court stopping the moves to remove Ayedatiwa. Now, a 3-member panel of the Court of Appeal in Abuja, headed by Haruna Samani, dismissed the appeal after the appeal was withdrawn by the appellant. The lawmakers, of course, joining me to discuss this is Olufemi Lawson, Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability. Olufemi Lawson, good to have you this evening.
Good evening.
Now, the President Tinubu's peace deal at the Ondo Assembly is obviously reaping its benefit as the appeal against the Deputy Governor is being withdrawn. Now, for the President to wade into this matter, was it a function of terrible leadership to begin with?
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
The point at which President Tinubu asked for coming was the very point that Ondo State was heading, into a state of anarchy. For nearly 6 months. There have been no clear-cut, defined leadership as far as Ondo State is concerned. And at some point, stakeholders from the civil society, opposition political parties, even from within the All Progressives Congress, which is the governing party in Ondo State, began to raise issues. But it got to the peak about a few days back when leaders of thought in Ondo State, led by no other person than our leader of Afenifere, Paruben Fashoranti, wrote an open letter to President Tinubu demanding for his intervention in the political situation in Ondo State. And I want to believe that was what necessitated President Tinubu's call for that peace deal.
Right.
You must understand that President Tinubu has a lot of respect for Baba Fashoranti and some of these leaders of Afenifere. At that point, President Tinubu called for a meeting and political actors in the state, got involved. But you must understand that this was not a dispute within the governing party, APC in Ondo State. This was an issue that has to do with the faith of the people of Ondo State, largely non-partisan, non-members of APC or whatever political parties. And smartly, the moment President Tinubu intervened, calling that meeting the other Friday, for those who are in Ondo State and for those of us who are in Ondo State, you could see how reduced the tension became in just less than 48 hours.
Okay.
Everything became like, hope, expectations. Not until a few days after, the House of Assembly sat and came out with a purported resolution of the meeting with the president, which, in my opinion, does not really represent what happened between the political actors and President Bola Tinubu.
All right, talking about that, let's go straight to the part where the Ondo State Commissioner for Information, Bamidele Ademola Olateju, has revealed that President Bola Tinubu asked the Deputy Governor of the state, Lucky Aiyedatiwa, for a signed resignation letter as part of his intervention in the state's political crisis. What do you understand by this?
You see, what the political crisis in Ondo State has caused, has created, in most cases, is so pathetic. Okay. Let me tell you this. It's least expected of somebody of Mrs. Olateju's status, or even the least intelligent person in Ondo State, to say that a democratically elected president, not just a president elected, a president of Asiwaju Bola Tinubu's democratic credential, will ask somebody elected by the people of Ondo State to bring a resignation letter to Abuja. The truth is this. We were all witnesses to the events of the meeting between President Tinubu and Ondo State political actors. The truth is that there was no official statement aftermath of that meeting from this presidency, if you followed. What does that mean? President Tinubu must have tried to resolve this matter along the line of family resolution, political party stakeholders, and President Tinubu must have also cautioned for peace, meaning that actors should be subtle in their approach to public engagement after this meeting. But for anyone in a democracy to say publicly that the president asked a democratically elected person, see, all these Bola Olateju and every other aides of the deputy governor, the governor, were not elected by the people. Only 2 people were elected by the people of Ondo State on the ballot. Mr. Rotimi Akeredolu and Lucky Aiyedatiwa, a joint ticket. It is fallacious, and I think it's an attempt to discredit the president.
Okay.
For the Commissioner for Information in Ondo State to state that President Tinubu demanded for a post-dated letter, for what? Was Mr. Ayedatiwa appointed by President Tinubu that he will now demand his post-dated resignation letter.
Okay, now that you've established that, in a few seconds before we go to the next topic, the warring factions have obviously decided to embrace peace. Despite this, do you think the possibility of a new political battle might be in the works in the nearest possible time?
Inevitably. What you are witnessing in Ondo State in the last couple of days is silence.
Okay.
And it's different from peace. What Ondo State deserves now is peace. And peace can only be achieved in the atmosphere of equity, justice, and fairness. As I speak to you tonight, there's no leadership in Ondo State.
Okay.
Governor is indisposed, is incapacitated. The deputy governor remains the deputy governor, not an acting governor. Gladiators are scheming to take over authorities that do not belong to them and are practically trying to use the name of the president, to further exploit the political situation. Very sad. But the people of Ondo State must realize that this is a democracy, and I believe strongly that President Tinubu will not support anything undemocratic in Ondo State.
Thank you very much, Olufemi. Now, and finally, the Supreme Court has ruled that the old Naira denominations of 200 Naira, 500 and 1,000 Naira notes continue to coexist with the new notes till further notice. The court maintained that the old and new notes should remain as legal tender beyond December 31st until the federal government puts a process in place for the replacement or redesign after due consultation with relevant stakeholders. The Apex Court had on March 3rd restrained the Central Bank of Nigeria from giving effect to the deadline on the use of old notes. However, the CBN on November 14th extended the validity of the old 200 Naira, 500 and 1,000 Naira notes indefinitely. Now, still with me to discuss this is Olufemi Lawson right here with me. Now, Olufemi, quickly, let's go through this. Now, the old and new Naira notes remain legal tender. What impact do you think this would have on the overall monetary policy in general?
Unfortunately, if you go to the streets today, and if I even ask you to bring out the notes in your pocket, it's very likely that you have more of those old Naira notes in your pocket than the new Naira note. Everything about the new Naira note was the machination of one man who wanted to, through the back door, manipulate the system to become the president. And at the point that he failed, he thought he could also destroy the system to the disadvantage of others. Yeah. I mean, Mr. Godwin Emefiele.
Absolutely.
Because in no sane climb, rather, would anybody wake up from the comfort or the corner of his bed space, somewhere in Maitama or Ikoyi or wherever, and give the timeline that the CBN gave under Emefiele for Nigerians to withdraw the old Naira note and spend the new Naira note. The truth is that even at the point that the reintroduction was purportedly made, there were no new Naira notes anywhere. In actual fact, the only few times we saw this new Naira note were at Owambes and social gatherings organized by some very people who are very close to the bank managers and the likes. It was just a mere policy aimed at punishing Nigerians and preventing Nigerians from voting certain persons into office in 2023. But unfortunately for Emefiele, he has refused to learn from history, because you don't wake up in an economy of 200 million people and decide, and it is one of the deficiencies of our democracy. Okay. Because if the will of the people have actually mattered, by the time the people were slumping on ATM queues, by the time people were being locked out of the banks, a reasonable leadership of the central bank would have withdrew that policy. But where are we today? And we have seen this in several other countries. Let me give an example of the United States. Between 1914 and now, every dollar note printed by the U.S. Forex Reserve have remained legal tender. Okay, why did Emefiele want us to withdraw Naira notes in just few weeks, just because he wanted to play politics with the monetary policies? I
was even coming to that. Now, finally, before we go, now, to think people actually lost their businesses and lost their lives when this artificial scarcity was created by the CBN last week administration. Now, of what significance do you think this news would have on those that were affected? If you look at the availability of our currency in the last couple of weeks, speculators, they don't only exist in the forex market, they also exist in the local currency market. If you look at the market in the last couple of weeks, there were attempts to hoard the Naira notes. And you could get to some ATM at some point and some cash transaction point, and the Naira note was becoming unavailable. People were anticipating the decision of the Supreme Court on this Naira note policy. But now that this has been decided, I'm very sure that this will bring a lot of relief. The Naira note will flow like it flowed, aftermath of the initial Supreme Court judgment. And I think Nigerians would have the Naira notes available to spend this time around without any fear, without any anxiety, created artificially by Emefiele and his gang. All right, Mr. Olufemi Lawson, thank you so much for your time. Of course, this was Olufemi Lawson, Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability. Well, that's our show for today. Remember, you can follow the conversation on our social media platforms, of course, at tvc.ng, or of course on our website at tvcnews.tv. I am Mark Otabo. Have a good evening.